גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכב הערב, מלך הוויטמינים, הפלפל.
אדום וירוק, ניחוח מתוק, ויטמין C ו-A, יש בו ברזל, לעיכול הוא עוזר, הסלט משתולל, הנוגס מתפעל, גם בה גם בו הוא בונה את הגוף, אמרו פלפל, פלללללללללללל, ירקות בן אדם ירקות, לבריאות.
גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכב הערב, הגזר. הגזר עשיר בוויטמין A העוזר לראייה. הגזר שומר על רקמות האור.
זור אותי, בימי מונח ותראה את ליבי. מכיל סידן ותאית ויטמין A ו-B.
למרות מתיקותו, הגזר מכיל מעט קלוריות ומועיל לבריאות ולניקיון השיניים. ירקות בן אדם וירקות לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכבי הערב, החצילים!
חצילים, 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 בכל השנה אני בעונה. חצילים, בכל מסעדה מנה ראשונה. חצילים, ניי 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 ניי. חצילים, לקלייה ולכיגון, לעפייה ולעידוי. ניי 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 ניי. ירקות בן אדם ירקות
לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכבת הערב, עגבנייה!
תמצא אותי בשוק בכל השנה, בוא ואכול אותי עגבנייה. אני עשירה במינרלים, טעם וצבע לא נורמלי.
מבושלת או טריה, תמיד מבריאה.
עוזרת לספיקת ברזל בדם עגבנייה, יש בי ויטמין C, הצטננת, קח אותי.
ירקות בן אדם ירקות
לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכב הערב, מלפפון!
מלפפון, 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 מלפפון,
מלפפון, מן הירקות האהובים ביותר על הישראלים. רענן ומשביע ויש בו מעט קלוריות. המלפפון מכיל ברזל וויטמין C ומשקיט רעב.
ירקות, בן אדם ירקות
לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכבי הערב, הפטריות. ירק אצילי בטעם מלכותי. הפטריות עשירות בוויטמין B. טעים חי או מעודה. הפטריות מכילות חלבון וברזל, יפות לקישוט וקלות להקפאה בעונת השפע. לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכב הערב, תפוח אדמה.
אני חשוב כמו הלחם,
תפוח אדמה,
אני כזה דיאטטי,
תפוח אדמה,
אני אחד מאבות המזון. יש בי תאית ברזל, עמילן וחלבונים.
כן, כן, תפוח אדמה, תפוח אדמה, לכל המשפחה, כן, תפוח אדמה,
אני אחד מאבות המזון.
ותיאבון ירקות, בן אדם ירקות,
לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכבי הערב, הכרובים!
הורה, כרוב סגול ולבן, כרוב ראשו מסולסל, עסיסי, בוויטמין C, הורה, כל כמות שתאכל, הוא שומר על משקל, עסיסי.
מכיל ברזל, חלבון ומומלץ לילדים.
ירקות, בן אדם ירקות,
לבריאות. גבירותיי ורבותיי, כוכב הערב, המלון!
המלון, המלון, איזה ריח מתוק, המלון, המלון, עגול וצהוב, המלון, המלון, במקום ארוחה, המלון, המלון, גם לי גם לך, המלון,
עשיר בוויטמין A ו-C,
המלון,
על אף מתיקותו דל קלוריות.
המלון,
הוא מרווה מאוד.
ירקות, בן אדם ירקות,
לבריאות. כוכבי הערב, ירקות! גבירותיי ורבותיי, רבותיי וגבירותיי, בקרוב סדרה חדשה, ירקות, כוכב הערב.
ירקות, בן אדם ירקות.
טעם, ניחוח, מינרלים, ויטמינים, וקרוב לכל המשפחה.
ירקות, בן אדם, ירקות. Do we think everybody's in? Waiting.
I'll just keep admitting people, but so far everybody is in.
Hello, everybody. Another night living with vegetables, you know. I'm very happy to introduce Ben Hagari, who is the newest member of our faculty, though he's been here for a couple of years now. And we're very happy that his talent and his personality and his teaching are part of our community and our department. He's done a wonderful job for us and will continue to. And this is an opportunity for more people to get to see his work. He's a graduate of the MFA at Columbia University, one of our competitions. He came to us 2 years ago and to teach, and the interactive and experimental and installation video curriculum that we have developed over the years. His films, or videos rather, I should say, are imaginative, experimental, multimedia, interactive, and tonight he's presenting fresh, a work, I guess, instead of saying a video, that will be featured tomorrow, is that right, at the Highline Festival? And
Thursday.
huh?
Thursday.
Thursday, right, okay. So we're getting the first look, and all of you can get a look there. He's done work with our students and Yale students on the big screen in Times Square, which was very successful. And he's winner of any number of prizes, including the Rose Museum Prize and LMCC Prize for, well, grant for residency, and has shown work in Israeli museums and American museums. And what's so great about his work is that it's fun. And he's joined tonight by two colleagues who worked on this project with him, Melanie Kress and Dale Stuckenbruck, who's going to make vegetables sound. And I'll let Ben introduce the two of them. Thank you all for being here. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Charles, for this invitation and introduction. And it's a lot of fun to see everyone here, and I love to be part of this community. I also want to, before we depart, to say thank you for Randy and Seth for all the preparation, and also and Adam and Ellis for making this event happen. Thank you. So tonight's talk, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, 20 questions for Ben Hagari, with Melanie Kress and Dale Stuckenbruck, is structured around this game of 20 questions. And some of these 20 questions that will appear will be answered, but some cannot really be answered. But they can address a certain idea, theme, an image, a still image, a moving image, and so they will be there to as a way to. It was an interesting challenge, kind of, to structure those questions, kind of think of what what inspires me or what makes me think about a project. And the focus, as Charles mentioned, is this one film called Fresh. But it departs into other works and inspirations. So let's begin with the first question. How do you keep vegetables fresh? I want to answer this question by beginning by seeing the first part of the film Fresh, and we're going to watch the half of the video. what is a human landscape? So the film Fresh, we just saw the first part of it. The second part will be screened later in the program. Started from this image that I found on the web, and I was obsessed with it. I was curious to understand why a person turns themselves to a still life, to a vegetable man. So to understand this image better, I recreated it, and I traced the same position, same posture of the body. And I thought if I will be inside, maybe I will understand it better. What's it like to be in this position? What's it like to turn yourself into a plant? And what I learned is that, like a plant, you are fixed into your position, like the part we just watched, lying down, later on sitting. You can't move because the vegetables will move and fall. And of course, the immediate connection perhaps to vegetables and portraiture is that of the work of Joseph Archimboldo. And I specifically fascinated with this image of the vegetable gardener. And what's interesting about these composite heads is that you can look at them and you can turn them around, and they both make sense. They're both coherent images. One is that of a head with vegetables, and the other that on the right side, which is invertible, and looks like a full composition that makes sense, is that of a bowl with vegetables. And what interests me about Archimboldo is not just that how vegetable kind of transforms into a human or a portrait. It's also the sense of humor, those kind of serious jokes. The first appearance, they seem funny, but they hold like this. They hold a lot of questions that are very serious, political, philosophical, and theological. And I think this tension between the serious and the funny, the tragic comedy, is something that also exists in the world of Fresh. And I also traced this logic, which has the logic of palindrome. We can read this image from bottom to top and from top to bottom, and it will have the same components, letter, ingredients, but with a different meaning. Human landscape, anthropomorphic landscape, or body as a landscape, merges together landscape and human portraits. Something that was kind of flourished in the 17th century. This is a work by Matthias Merian the Elder. A face hidden in the landscape, a bearded man depicted in a profile looking up at the sky. Perhaps man as a cultivator of earth. I'm showing also this painting because right now it is being presented next to the film Fresh at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And it's part of an exhibition that explores this idea of human landscape. And the name of the exhibition is Bodyscapes. In Fresh, the body transforms throughout the film. It is consumed by insects and other animals, by machines, and later on in the film by other humans. So this landscape is that fragile one that changes. If you ever smell the flower that smells like a corpse, the largest flower in the world, Amorpholius titanium, also known as the corpse flower or titanarum, grows in the forests of central Sumatra in Indonesia, and is very hard to trace it. It's about 9 feet tall. And this is the photograph of the first Amorpholius titanium in the US. As it was shot at the Botanical Garden. It takes this plant about 7 years to grow. And then at no particular time of the year or at any predictable moment, it opens up and suddenly at great speed, a few inches every day. And it develops kind of into this enormous height. And 2 days later, the structure collapsed. I've read somewhere the word attributed to this plant is diva, a diva plant. And these images that appear also in the film are based on the historical images from the Botanical Garden in New York, hand painted for the film, and then later on projected through a 35mm film projector. They show the life cycle of the titanarum, and then with all its glory, it collapses and leaves kind of no trace that it was there. And the smell is related to the fact that when it fully opens up, it produces this smell of rotten fish, or I've never seen one in person, but there's people that are really keeping track of all the Amorpholius titanium out there in the different botanical gardens or in other places in the world, and we travel to see it in person. And I've been following in the research for the film. I've been looking at nature documentaries. The film kind of starts from the point of view of the insect, and it and again later present this flower. I'm fascinated kind of with the relationship between the human and this flower. The size of the plant kind of resembles kind of the size of the flower. The fact that it's attributed like a certain smell, and and draws people to see it, are part of those reason of choosing this for the film. Do plants have emotions? The Secret Life of Plants, a book from 1973, gathers finding of several scientific minds of the 60s dedicated to the plant world and to the understanding of its inner world. And I will quote a short text from the book. Evidence now supports the vision of the poet and the philosopher that plants are living, breathing, communicating creatures endowed with personality and the attributes of soul. It is only we in our blindness who have insisted on considering them automata. A few years after the book came out, a documentary film followed. It kept the same title, The Secret Life of Plants, and had original music by Stevie Wonder. And the film traces these discoveries, which included experiments that focus on new technologies of the time and to conduct a specific plant research. Devices such as polygraph, video camera, sensors, audio systems, a film projector, electrical toys, and more, which would produce a signal or result by their definition, but if taken out of context. Of course, we know that polygraph is used for a completely different reason than connecting it to plant kingdom. I would like to play a part from an edited sequence from this film. And before I do that, I would just give a context. The most famous case in the book and in the film is the case of Cliff Baxter, who was known as a lie examiner that worked for the CIA. And one day decided to conduct an unconventional experiment connecting one of his polygraph machines to a house plant that he had in his office. He explains in the film, in part that I edited out, that he decided to pose a threat to his plant. He took the plant and put it in his cup of coffee, in a hot cup of coffee, and the results showed no reaction on the polygraph. He later on imagined that he would threaten the plant in his mind by placing the plant on fire, and this did create a very extreme reaction on the polygraph. So through his experiments, Baxter discovered that plants displayed a rich area of electrical activity when anticipating threats to their own lives or to the life of other plants and animals. That became known as the Baxter effect. And now let's watch, I've gathered 3 different experiments, one from the US, that of Cliff Baxter, and another one from Russia, and one from Japan.
Baxter hopes to show that plants react to any termination of life in their immediate environment. During the next 6 hours, at some undetermined moment chosen by a randomizer, these brine shrimp will fall to their deaths in boiling water. By totally automating his equipment, Baxter is determined to eliminate human influence. In another room, completely separate from his laboratory, Baxter has placed a philodendron plant, a polygraph, and a videotape recorder. Carefully, he places a leaf between a pair of electrodes that will monitor the electrical activity of the plant. As he has done during countless police interrogations, Baxter establishes a baseline on his polygraph to get an accurate recording of the reaction of his subjects.
Research conducted in the Soviet Union leads scientists to believe that plants may think. Attached to delicate electronic instruments, a cabbage plant registers annoyance to the exhaling of tobacco smoke on its leaf surfaces. A scene familiar in any kitchen takes on special importance in this experiment.
Володя, переключи задание по всем параметрам. Тамара, бери препарат. Все готовы? Начинай.
In some mysterious way, the plant which is attached to the instrument is able to feel the mutilation of its comrade. In a more advanced experiment, technicians were asked to pass through a laboratory containing 2 living cabbage plants. One of the subjects has been instructed to destroy the plant which is not attached to the electronic instruments. Hours later, the technicians are asked to return to the scene of the crime. The evidence is clear. The remaining plant has correctly identified the assailant.
Ты должна быть сердитой.
During recent years, gardening enthusiasts throughout Japan have been privileged to witness the remarkable demonstrations of Dr. and Mrs. Kenneth Hashimoto. Dr. Hashimoto, Managing Director and Chief of Research for the Fuji Electronic Industries, has constructed special instruments which translate the electrical output of plants into modulated sounds, giving voice to a cactus. Relying on her affinity for plants, Mrs. Hashimoto looks forward to actual conversation with her cactus. Convinced that it possesses an intelligence, she is determined to teach it the Japanese alphabet.
The plant is making a mark, perhaps communicating, but without speaking a word, as if it was an actor in a silent film. It is maybe the most common to witness a lie detector test in a crime film, making it an effective tool to create tension in the viewer's mind. And such intent is incorporated into this film as we are waiting for the plant to react. My curiosity and interest with The Secret Life of Plant is that of the human interest in finding emotion in plants, whether if these experiments are accurate or true. For the film, I've invited Joseph Barry, a polygraph examiner, connected the vegetable man to a polygraph machine while images life cycle of the Amphalus titanium, and we saw the life cycle of the Amphalus titanium starts to bloom and then collapse, examining the reaction, the emotions of this figure into those series of images. Do you need eyes to see? This is an edited sequence from an earlier piece, a 35mm film called Invert, which portrays a day in an inverted world. Both inanimate objects and human are represented on the logic of complementary colors, an inversion of light and shadow to match kind of the material of the film.
שמש?
אמא.
This man named Invert is shown using a color reversal technique as he attempts to teach his silent parrot to speak unsuccessfully. The words which we just heard are names of the objects that usually appear on screen, but spoken backwards. This is how the film was created, and this is how this protagonist, Invert, looked like on the set. This was the skin tone needed in order to become, in order to live in this kind of, or in this existence, in this inverted existence. And this film shows my interest in optical illusions and perception, but I wanted also to bring it here or connect it to a protagonist that that its senses are covered, are blocked, not able to. In the case of Invert, the eyes are closed and there's cotton wools in the nostrils and ears to kind of block the dark holes so that they will appear black on the celluloid, on the film. So it created a certain performance out of these conditions of appearing in blindness and navigating kind of through this very disorienting set. And I found that with through several characters and several protagonists in films that they don't have eyes or other facial organs. They look for different ways to communicate, both with the animals or objects around them, but also with the viewer. And that's something that I hope we can later on dive further when Dale joins in the presentation. Is it still fresh? Let's now watch the second part of the second part and last part of the film Fresh. What would you eat from this plate? It's a plate from 500 years of age by Bernard Palissy, a scientist interested in observing the natural world, as well as a known ceramicist. among other interesting talents he had. But he said produced his designs by attaching casts of dead lizards, snakes, and shellfish to traditional ceramic forms, such as this plate and a jug that we will see in a moment. He then painted them and added glaze to make the kind of create this kind of watery effect to it. And what's I think fascinating, and I'm showing this few images of the insects from the film Fresh, kind of intertwined with the vegetable and the body underneath. Because in every frame we see of Fresh, we see a vegetable with a breathing body underneath, and that is kind of somewhat the relationship I was curious for, or was looking for, this intersection of animal, vegetable, and mineral, kind of becoming one, which I think something that happens beautifully in the ceramic works of Palissé, that the heat merges all these things together, the animal with the clay and with the sea world, and this is an image of one jug from several points of views. Cryfish, frog at the very front. I think it was quite pioneering in the fact that he used dead animals, do direct casting, and add them to his pieces. I also wanted to mention another artist that I was looking at or thinking about with a different project, and that is George Orr. And this is there is a relationship or connection between the two, and we see in George Orr again kind of how the heat merges the animal in the clay, but there's also this kind of both, like the plate we saw earlier, and these are obviously not intentionally functional objects, so they hold a certain dysfunctionality mixed with the animal, which brings in a sense of humor and this kind of serious funny that was talked earlier in regard to Archimboldo. This is George Orr standing on his head. He was also interested in photographic experiments early on. And I will just show briefly images from another project that made this kind of another intersection of animal and clay and mineral, or animal and mineral and human into one. And it's this project called Potter's Wheel, which begins with the potter Paul Shalef working in an atelier, creating this pot out of a lump of clay, but instead of the potter's wheel turning, the entire room is spinning while the center is fixed, the center is stationary, and the potter is moving around the clay. And so the film was installed. So the stage spins, and in the second part, we enter the kiln, this imaginary kiln, and this kind of teapot with the snake turned into and the human covered with clay, and snake becoming one, or dancing into one. as the figure approaches the fire, the clay hardens, and it ends with a tear. Can you make a film from plants? Mothlight, piece by Stan Brakhage, is a cameraless film that incorporates real-world elements in a collage form. He collected wings, flower petals, and grass and pressed them between two strips of 16mm film. Each of these real elements appear for only one frame. The result creates a flickery image. There is no sound, but there is a lot of rhythm. These objects, in order to put them into the film, they need to be thin, translucent, and to permit the passage of light. Here we see an image of the film strip from Mothlight. This is a project I created called Escalation. And I used very thin pieces of salami that I placed inside a 35mm slide projector. The result was this abstract images that might resemble landscape or hidden faces within landscape. Am I in a pickle? In Hebrew, the word pickle has a dual meaning. It's the word is called achmatza, which is to be missed. And I created this series of 5 jars, like a Archimboldo-like family portraits. And they were on display in a show, filled only with water, not properly pickled. And this is their image from the first day of the exhibition. And this is the image of a month later, or 6 weeks later, at the end of the show. And in fresh, a chef harvests vegetable from the figure, while also hands of musicians create musical instruments out of the vegetable. But the chef takes the animals and place them in a jar next to this kind of faceless figure. And I was interested in this moment that suddenly the body gradually disappears as a face is formed in a pickle jar and a sound is formed. Finally, last question I pose to myself is, what's it like to live in a greenhouse? The set of the greenhouse in the film functions throughout the film. It changes, it transforms, like the character. The set also transforms. It starts from a nature documentary. It then moves into kind of a scientific space for the polygraph examiner, and it later turns into the site for a chef, and finally it functions as a concert space for the musicians. I often start with model, the model of the fresh with some printed elements, and the greenhouse also transformed later on after the film was created into a screening environment where I first projected the video. The video was also screened in a real greenhouse in a science museum for several years, while the different vegetation around changed. And I'm very, very excited for the next iteration, which will be the screening of film on the Highline, which would be outdoor screening next to the vegetation and plants of the Highline. And I want to pose the next question for Melanie. How do we hear the world around us? And before Melanie can respond, I would just want to introduce Melanie. Melanie Kress is a curator and writer based in New York. She is the associate curator for Highline Art, where since 2014, she has commissioned and produced projects with artists including Maria Teresa Alvas, Ljubljana Himid, Zoe Leonard, Lydia Lewis, Sable Ellie Smith, and Will Rawls, among others. In 2010, she co-founded the Brooklyn-based project space Concrete Utopia, of which she was director and chief curator until its closing in 2012. She holds a BA in art history and visual arts from Barnard College and an MA in contemporary art theory from Goldsmiths, University of London. Thank you, Melanie, for joining.
Thank you, Ben, for inviting me, and to everyone from SVA for this amazing forum. I'm sorry, I feel like I have to start with this off-topic note, but just watching your last...
share.
Huh?
Let me stop my share.
From your last two questions, just the other day, I was listening to this song with my family, I Don't Want to Eat a Pickle by Arlo Guthrie, and I hope that you're familiar, but I can't help but think of it from that note. So Ben has invited me today. Here, I'll share what's upcoming. So as he said, this amazing work, Fresh, will be on the Highline as part of a group exhibition called The Musical Brain, starting on Thursday. We actually have two exhibitions this year called The Musical Brain, or two halves of the same exhibition, one of which is a series of sculptural commissions that have just been completed and being installed in the park. And the second of which is this video exhibition, which will feature Ben's work. And I tried to find, full disclosure, I cheated. This is a rendering because the artwork hasn't gone up and will be up in the next couple of days. But I tried to find an image that gives you a sense of that you walk through. So this is a covered passageway at 14th Street where the work is installed. But to find an image that had the trees in the background to give you a sense of the fact that, you know, even though you're in this semi-enclosed space watching films and videos on this program, you can still hear the sound of the wind in the trees, and of course the joyous music of emergency vehicles downstairs and traffic and construction, but you're really immersed in the city, but also this amazing horticulture. So I'll talk a little bit more about The Musical Brain, but first I wanted to back up and talk a little bit more about the context. So thank you again, Ben, for that introduction. So I am the Associate Curator for Highline Art, and Highline Art is a program of public art presented on and around the Highline Park. I'm sure many, if not all of you, have been there at some point. And we work with about 30 contemporary artists every year. The program started in 2009, and artists show work in a variety of formats: the film program, sculptures, a mural, a series of rotating billboards from a number of years ago. And all of the artworks that we install are in conversation somehow with the plantings and the design around. And so thinking about the prompt for this lecture, animal, mineral, vegetable, we're always thinking about all of those things in space. We're thinking about the people who come to the park. We're thinking about the horticulture that came before, the plants that are managed by an incredible team of gardeners, the design, which is made up of many different kinds of minerals, and how all of that comes together to be a site for art and interaction. And so in thinking about that, I always go back to these photographs. So there's a photographer named Joel Sternfeld who in the day, so the Highline was a freight rail line. It was built in it was originally a freight rail line that ran on ground level in the late 1800s. It was elevated in the 1930s and then abandoned in the 1990s, largely due to the rise of interstate trucking and deregulation of that industry. But it stood like this for a number of years. And so if anyone has been to Hudson Yards recently or the far west side of Manhattan, this is looking down 30th Street to what would eventually become the Highline. But so Joel spent a number of months going up and photographing the park, what would become the park in a number of different seasons. And then these photographs were a part of the campaign that Friends of the Highline, the nonprofit organization that campaigned for this to be turned into a public space and still manages the space, used as a way to inspire folks to think about an abandoned but also a wild landscape on the far west side of Manhattan. And so the landscape that was there and the plants that were growing wild were really a part of the inspiration from the beginning. And then when the space was built out and designed by Taylor Scofidio and Renfro, the architects, James Cornerfield Operations, the landscape architects, and then Piet Oudolf, who's the Dutch horticulturalist who designed all of the amazing plantings in the park. This wild landscape inspired that cultivated landscape. And so there's always a connection there. And with that, we often will share that with all of the artists who come to envision a piece in the park. And I wanted to share a few artworks that really directly interacted with the animals and the vegetables in the park. And this was an early piece from 2011 by Sarah Z. This is actually a birdhouse, a bird feeder, and it was installed for 1 year. I believe still, if you walk the park on Google Maps, you can see it on Street View the day that they were deinstalling. But as soon as it was removed, people would start asking staff, and still do sometimes, where the bird feeders went and what was going to happen to the birds afterwards. And so it really became a part of the surrounding landscape. This is another favorite. This is a commission by Adrian Villarrojas called The Evolution of God, and it was 13 cubes installed in the Western rail yards. You can see here, this is the one section of the park up between 11th and 12th Avenues, 30th and 34th Streets, that isn't like a planned landscape. It's still the wild plants that were growing there before and managed themselves. And so he installed these cubes full of soil and concrete and then let them disintegrate or be taken over by plants over the course of the 12 months that they were installed. And so you can see here some of the plants that were growing out. He also filled them with different things like bones and sneakers and iPods, but also squash and other vegetables. And so we had watermelons growing out of one of them. But I remember the most magical thing about this project was that you would walk just before sunset around the artwork and you could hear the crickets that had made their homes inside of them, which felt like a very generous artwork to me. This is another piece by Rashid Johnson. If anyone's familiar with these cube artworks that he does when he installs them indoors in museums and galleries, they're filled with these shea butter busts, lots of other references, books, records, etc., but then also houseplants or potted plants. And so for the Highline, he decided to install just the structure itself and then let the plants do their thing and inhabit the artwork over the course of the 12 months. And it really put on show, not that they don't already, but all of the changing seasons as you could see them fluctuating through the sculpture. And then last but not least, I love this is a fuzzy phone photo. This is a part of an installation by Olafur Eliasson. It was an installation of 3 million, was it, Lego blocks that people could come and turn into their ideal vision of a future city. And we had this visitor that made some of the most news, this amazing praying mantis, who would come and see the piece, but we also would have other flora and fauna come visit throughout. Which brings me back to Ben's piece. So as we were talking about this, a lot of the themes behind the Musical Brain exhibition, both the videos and the sculptures, is thinking about what we hear in the world around us and how humans have a tendency to look for patterns that they can recognize and repeat. And music is very much a pattern thing. And so we'll talk about, this is a corny example to bring up from the Highline, but the rhythm of the train tracks, right? Or the music of the leaves brushing against each other, that we hear music around us as a way to hear beauty, but also as a way to hear order. And so a lot of the artists in this program are thinking about how we hear around us, but also, of course, how music is a creative entity of how we express ourselves and communicate, but then also this relationship between silence and noise, or order and music, or order and chaos. So I'll share, this is a image of the channel program, just for a little background, that the program plays every day from dusk until the park closes. So you can see Ben's piece and the 3 other artworks starting at 7 p.m. coming up on Thursday through the end of June, from 7 until the park closes at 9, starting May 1st. But these are a few of the artworks that are in the commissions, the group exhibition that I wanted to mention, to give a sense of the scope of the way that folks are thinking about music. So Rebecca Belmore and Osvaldo Yarrow, a couple based in Toronto, they are thinking about sirens and how youth are the sirens of our day, calling for action around climate change. And so this is a sculpture that they made. It's cast in concrete out of found objects that they found near a friend's studio in Miami. It's diminutive in size. It's a little bit shorter than me. She wanted it to call directly to youth and to young people, but changing the image of the siren from something negative into really lauding what youth are doing these days. Then Vivienne Couturier, this is a piece made out of a giant stack of sculptures. You can just see them behind the reflective glass. And it's intended to look like a stack of sculptures that you would see on the street in Brazil or a part of festivals, but then it has this reflective glass on it. She's done this series a number of times that's meant to look like new construction or new development in neighborhood, to think about the interaction between lived experience on the street and what this kind of new clean development does. It's also installed, again, right next to Hudson Yards, and there's a really strong aesthetic connection between the glass that's used up there. Raul de Nieves thinking about how musicians have to put on a persona, Ben also thinking about costuming and the costuming of vegetables and taking on another entity and to be able to perform another, or to perform beyond one's daily capacity as a musician. So these are 3, they're actually store mannequins that he then bedazzles, and they're covered in a clear resin, so they survive 12 months outdoors on the Highline. Then Guillermo Galindo, another artist thinking about reading or listening to the music of the world around us. This is a collaborative series he's done with the photographer Richard Mizrash, and they've gone around different places on the US-Mexico border, and Richard will photograph objects that they find there, and then Guillermo collects them and turns them into musical instruments. So this is a water tank. Volunteers will put water tanks out in the desert along the border for people who are trying to make the crossing to have access to fresh water. The flag is so that you can see it from far away. And then sadly, others will come and shoot through them with bullets, and so the water drains out. And so he's taken this object and turned it into a musical instrument. You can just see here the spouts that are coming out of the holes that were shot in it, then drip onto the steel plate below, and that sound is amplified. Then I was thinking about the sounds of the creatures and all of the clicking noises, and how we can read so much into the world and hear so much more through the technology of these amplified sounds. And then David Horvitz, this is a series of bells. He's thinking about time, of course, very important for music. He and Namaste Bar, who we'll see after, are both thinking through this way. He took a rail track, one of the original rail tracks from the Highline, melted it down, and then recast it into these bells. And for him, he's thinking about how a church bell in the middle of a square sets a standard time for everyone who can hear it. And when the trains made their way across North America, it was one of the first standardizations of time in the continent, because they had to standardize the train schedules. And so the piece, The Day of 1,000 Hours, is referencing the first day when they standardized those time schedules. And you can hear them in the windier days playing just outside our offices. Antonio Vega Macotella, another artist thinking about silence and noise. This is actually a lens that was cast in resin from a 3D file, a 3D print file. And what he's done is he's taken the digital information from that file and embedded in it the digital information of 1 second of noise from another video. And so he's taking digital information to cloud this other clarity of a lens. And the silent second is taken from a video someone made riding this train called the Beast that makes its way through Mexico from Central America to the US. A lot of people will ride it on their way north to try to reach the US-Mexico border. And so that second of silence is taken from a video on the train. Mai Tu Pare, this is another wind chime. It's bronze cast lungs, uterus, and heart, again, that are just north of here where I am at the office right now. And they all have a clangor inside, and so they'll ring in the wind, sort of like ringing the human body. And then last but not least, Namat Sebar, another artist thinking about time. This is her equal measure. It's a pedestal that's meant to reference monuments and conversations about monuments today that's been combined with a metronome. And so for her, you can see here, it says then, now, and then on her time scale for the metronome, meant to think about how time interacts with how we perceive monuments, monumentality, and who should be monumentalized. I always think of an example when the mayor of New York City put together a monuments commission to think about what to do about monuments today. The commission recommended to evaluate the time when the person who's been monumentalized or memorialized lived, the time when the monument went up, the time when it was first protested, and then the contemporary moment, and to evaluate all of those different timescales. But so thinking about this specific social conversation in conversation with time and music, I think is really interesting. And that is all from me.
Thank you so much, Melanie.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, the next question. Do you have any, oops, this is not it, sorry. Did you ever play the gourd? This is an introduction to Dale Stuckenbruck. Dale Stuckenbruck is immersed in the diverse musical life in New York as a soloist, concertmaster, chamber musician, collaborator, and teacher. As a violinist and mandolinist, he appeared at the Metropolitan Opera, New York City Opera, Queens Philharmonic, and has toured in recitals in Asia, Europe, and South America. Dale Stuckenbruck is recognized as one of the premier artists of the musical saw. He has performed the saw in chamber music with Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society and with the Leonid Kavakos and the New York Philharmonic, among others. Founder of the Long Island Vegetable Orchestra, and most recently, Dale is learning the sitar. So I'm very excited to have Dale join in with his presentation.
Thank you, Ben. It's exciting to be here with you and to share again in the journeys that we've had together. I discovered this relationship to vegetables in 2005 as a way to communicate to students at a school who were not interested in music. And sometimes I feel we as classical musicians haven't found the best ways to reach our audiences. So this was the last chance to get them involved in anything musical. So I tried to do it as interestingly as I could. I found out about the Viennese Vegetable Orchestra, and they inspired me to start. And everything looks easy when you see a video of something, but then I realized how hard it was and how many times I had to do it. But these students really got into it, and it became really cool. I then founded the Vegetable Orchestra, Long Island, and I have a colleague who's a wonderful maker as well. And so we've done a number of things along this way. And every time we make instruments, we discover a new one, we discover new things in the making process, and new instruments that have never been made before on this planet. And hopefully I get to show you one of those today that's never been seen before. So before we go on, if you don't mind, I would love, Ben, if you might show a clip of your film that is a vegetable talks back at you. If I may just briefly state that one of the things that I felt about vegetables is that even though we eat them and perhaps play with them and make sounds with them, I feel there's a connection that happens. And then in our conversations, he's brought me always to a deeper point in terms of my thinking of what I'm actually doing. And it's been such a cool relationship. So I will let Ben take over for this.
Thank you, Dale. Can a vegetable talk back at you?
Thank you, Ben, for that introduction to the vegetables. I would like to share with you, I have excerpts from my orchestra and to show you our classifications of my orchestra. And some of them you've already seen, but I will start with our brass section. So you saw one already. I simply added a trumpet mouthpiece to this. So you could do a trumpet, a trombone mouthpiece, because they have different bores and different qualities to them. So it just makes it easier to make certain pitches if you have a mouthpiece. So the things of our vegetable orchestra that I wanted to be able to do is actually codify how we can actually predetermine the pitches that we'll play. Many orchestras or other groups like this, they have to do pretty much be improvisatory and not necessarily pitch related. So with my colleague Dan Battaglia, we've been able to kind of play in the key of C major and play diatonically, so composers can write compositions for us and things like that. So it's been quite a cool process to get all the instruments in the same key. So that basically covers, there are many types of brass instruments that could be done this way. Let me go to our woodwind section. So in our woodwind section, we have, I don't have a single reed instrument, but I have a double reed. Our double reed instrument, our oboe, this is a Chinese leaf asparagus. So it's a larger than our asparagus that we know. And I go to very different types of grocery stores, vegetable places. Some are Spanish, Chinese, they're Vietnamese, anything from our global culture, from India. And I look for
20 hours.
Sorry, whoops. I look for new vegetables all the time. So the reed is made, I don't know if you can see it, but it's made from vegetable plastic. I have biodegradable cups, and I use them to make my reeds. So eventually they go back into our earth. So one can buy plastic made of vegetables. You may know that already. But anyway, so here's a reed, asparagus leaf. I'm not sure if this has ever been done before, actually, but. So there's that. So then we have our flutes. They sit next to the oboe, of course, up front. And there are different kinds. There's like the panpipe style, which is like this. So you blow up, the hole is like this, and you have that sharp edge. And with a panpipe, you can create many of these in different pitches. Then I have the normal recorder style. So that goes like this. This has 6 holes in them. Then, so it's that recorder style. So interesting. So one of the difficulties is for this type is to create the bore inside so that it diminishes, and the hole diminishes as it gets to the end. You see the hole is quite big at the top with that plug in it, but at the end it's only a small hole. So inside the channel becomes smaller. So it's has to do with having the right tools. And one of my favorite is this. I think last time I checked, this had like a 2.5 octave range. I like it because you could play in any key, but let's see, hopefully it didn't dry out. So that's the slide carrot. And then we have one of my favorite things is, and perhaps others here, like Ben, perhaps. So I have the slide version in a broccoli, which I simply have a carrot that I have made as the slide, and I channeled here this broccoli. What I like about it is that the forest is still there, you know, and you're playing in the middle of the trees, and it's you really feel like you're you're in the vegetable when you're playing this. It is so sweet because the inside of the vegetable has a lot of water, and so the sound is different than the carrot, which has a stronger sound, as you could hear. But this is very gentle, but very pure and beautiful. So here's the slide version of the broccoli. Okay, so then here is the recorder style broccoli, which again is so sweet. Let's see, here it is. I have to find the holes. So it's because of that water content that makes that so special. So here's an instrument that's never been heard publicly on the planet. This combines a drone. I don't know if you can see, I have put two channels in there. One is a drone flute that is stationary, and the other one is the non-stationary, is the slide. So I play them both at the same time. If you, I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm actually producing three notes because you're hearing the sympathetic vibrations at the same time, the overtones that intersect between the lower drone and the higher note. So it's pretty. I don't know, could you hear that sympathetic tone? Yeah. So this is my drone broccoli. And again, I like it because it's like this is in the middle of the forest. It's almost like the plant that Ben was talking about. So it's combination of two vegetables into one.
At a world premiere. So at a world premiere.
Yes, a world premiere. In fact, you're the first people outside of my family that has ever seen this. No one has ever made this before. So I've been wanting to make it, but then I always, like earlier today, the two channels went into each other, and then I had one slide and two same channels, and it produced a stereo effect of the tones. It was funny because as I changed the slide in one, it affected the pitch in the other. So it was very interesting. Yes. So in terms of the woodwinds, we have the ocarina. I've never used this before. Usually I do it potatoes. This is called a jicama. Do you know of this fruit, this vegetable from South America? So it has a lovely deep tone. It's very delicious too. I eat a lot of raw vegetables, as you can probably notice. Percussion instruments, I use lemongrass. It smells good while you play. So here's that you've already seen in the videos, but so there are different sounds, so therefore different consonants and vowels that you can assign to different parts of the instrument in how you play. And of course this. You can make your next electronic beats with this. So there are many more. You've seen some of the other percussion instruments. One of my favorite things in this orchestra, which usually if you play in an orchestra and you make a squeaky sound, you get kicked out. In my orchestra, I welcome your squeaks. So I have the artichoke, which you heard before. And I have the Brussels sprouts, which are more delicate. And again, you feel like they have their own language. Another vegetable is bamboo, which you can eat when it's a baby. And when I was in Taiwan, I had lovely bamboo shoots with mayonnaise, I think. So this is a violin that's been made purely out of bamboo. And it has a face, just naturally. And it sounds pretty amazing. So it's a very vocal and sound that you can do with that. So that is the crux of my orchestra. And each one has its own character. And like we've discovered, every carat that I touch and make is different from the previous one. So it's like I'm dealing with a new person every time I touch a vegetable and work at it. It's never the same. And so the variables are sometimes very difficult to manage from vegetable to vegetable. When you're doing something where you expect a certain result, sometimes the vegetable doesn't want you to work with it. And other times it feels like it's just welcoming you and you just know how to carve this. So there's something really human about that. At this point, I'd like, Ben, would you mind showing us a little bit more of that relationship of the human to our vegetables?
Before we watch the next thing from Dale's presentation, I want to note that after Dale's presentation, we will have time for Q&A. So if there's any questions you want to write in the chat or want to ask directly, you can think about them in the meantime. So what's behind the fridge?
אני.
אני.
It's good in the
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you all. Dale, Melanie, Ben. It's a fascinating journey into the world of vegetables and what they say, what they do, and what they eat and who eats them. And I'm sure we have a little time just left for questions and answers. And when's the release of the recording? Can I get the music on Apple?
I'll come to your house and play.
We're going to make you next year to come here with the full orchestra and perform in our facility.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would just want to note that all the instruments you heard Dale playing tonight were all fresh, meaning he made them specially for this event, because the life of these instruments are very, very short. They can be played for about an hour, right, Dale? And then they don't produce any more sound, which is from our conversation. This is also the reason why I end up calling the film Fresh. And I know that Dale also prepared to create a demo for you tonight. But I will post at the end of the evening. I will post some links so that you can watch the entire films that I showed, and links to Dale's work, and also a video showing you some demo how to create an instrument.
Richard Leslie has a very interesting question. You want to pose it? It's in the chat. But...
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of Michael Pollan's work and the botany of desire and his exploration of the interrelationships between human desire and vegetables. And so that would be like one possibility to expand on that. But the other one was that I'm sorry to be such a modernist, but I was intrigued by the origin question, when going back to your first photograph, and you personally, about why you were intrigued by that particular photograph so much that you would emulate it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Richard, for the question, and I will dive further into the text you mentioned by Poland. In regard to Archimboldo and the image that I originally found, I think my main, some things I understand post the work, and I think one of them was this interest in communicating communicating non-verbally through the music, through possibly play and gestures of the character. It is kind of like a silent film to extent, but it's also a very musical film. So I think that that interest, I think, in Archimboldo in language, like how we can look at these images and think about. There's an interesting text that I read when I was working on this process by Roland Barthes, that text specifically about Archimboldo and how to understand Archimboldo's work through structure of language.
Yeah, interesting. So semiotics. Interesting. Yeah. I found it delightful, absolutely delightful, and very useful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, we just don't see enough delight, you know, and that's, of course, Dale's crazy, but that's wonderful. So is a guy named Jaron Lanier, who gave us, you know, virtual reality, who makes his own instruments. So.
It's about 20 years ago he spoke here too. Thank you all very much. Yeah, there's another question.
Just another thought in regard to Richard, and maybe Dave would also want to add his thoughts. But you know, it started from this image, but the film went into a lot of direction. As I said, from nature documentaries to scientific to music video concert, and I think it was kind of like a salad in the end, to continue with the metaphors of vegetables. But what unites all the parts together, the very different parts that we watch the first part and then we watch the second part, is the human body in it, underneath the vegetables. I see there's a few more, also a few more questions. People, let me. These are not yet questions, but these are thank you notes. Dale, if you want to add on the process, or.
Thank you very, very much. I thought of just very briefly having you hear something. And just to let you think what animals these were. And to think that these were sounds that you just heard all came from vegetables. And people would think that this is from a rainforest.
Right.
I just thought it's so amazing that we eat these vegetables, yet the vegetables are capable of imitating animals and humans. I thought that another element of how closely we're related. Just wanted to say that.
As a vegetarian for 40 years, I'm glad to hear that. Also take note of Barbara London, who's been that groundbreaker at MoMA, that curator of sound, who introduced it back in the 70s, you know, soundscapes, you know, and she's done a lot of stuff, a lot of work with in that there in MoMA and PS1 on these soundscapes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. I hope I can use your work. I teach a new course in the spring of 2022. At least 1/3 of it will be given to art of the Anthropocene. And this really works very well. Yeah.
It'd be lovely. Thank you. Are there anyone else who'd like to pose a question?
Well, if not, I'll keep babbling.
Well, I think we got to really, it's getting late. And once again, we're all delighted and interested. And Melanie, thank you for the tour through the Highline. And we have a lot of students who come from many different places who were a little bit sequestered this year. So maybe it's time to go take a walk on the Highline and see nature and art and the urban environment. By the way, Joel was teaching here when he made those pictures. as well as
Wow.
Lawrence. So, and Richard Mesrak has been a advisor in our department, so to thesis students. So we feel a little connection, and all of us love that site. And I hope that the screening, we'll call it, the public viewing of it, beginning on Thursday, everybody will hopefully get to see the whole thing. And it's a perfect time of year to take a stroll there. So thank you all, Dale, Melanie, Ben.
Thank you so much, Charles, and everyone in the program. I just wanted to note that I posted in the chat links to different things that were shown tonight, both from my presentation, Melanie and Dale. Melanie had to depart a few minutes ago, so she wishes everyone well and thank you. It was a huge thank you to Dale for all his preparation for this evening and for the wonderful sounds. It's always so deep to hear you produce animal, vegetables, and minerals from these instruments. So good night, everyone, and hope to see you soon in person.